This is Sweetheart Sadist live from Rochester, New York at the Rochester Erotic Arts Festival. And I have the honor of being seated next to Lew Rubins, an amazing rope guy.
Well, thank you very much. Nice to be here.
So tell me, how did you get your start in rope?
Well, let's see. There's an official start and an unofficial start. I'll give you short versions of both for the first answer.
Okay.
The unofficial start was I was a bondage freak from my earliest conscious memories. I was 4 years old. She was 4 years old when I tied up my first little girl. All my life, everywhere I lived, every kid in the neighborhood got tied up eventually under the guise of playing cowboys and Indians or playing army. I didn't even know it was sexual until adolescence, and then I stopped tying up the boys as much. But officially, I hooked up my first computer in the late winter, early spring of 2000. And after I got tired of browsing every bondage site out there, I started finding people, and I made up my mind for the first time in my life that I was going to be a part of this. And I was going there, and I wasn't going to take no for an answer, and I'm taking everybody with me I can. And I made a conscious choice at that decision to jump into this full blast. And within a year, I had my own website up and was touring the country.
That is awesome. What advice do you give to people who are new to rope or are just converting to rope? Because, like, personally, I've watched people do it, and I've been like, gee, that takes a long time, and it's kind of boring. But recently I've interacted with some people who have made it more fascinating for me, and seeing you do it really just brings it alive and the joy in it. And so what advice do you have to new people?
Well, it's funny that you say that about yourself, because it's something that I teach directly in my classes. I tell people that in the name of doing research, I do research everywhere. I backed up to a table of bondage bottoms one time and listened to them. And I'd heard them talking about, oh, bondage is good, but it takes so long and it's so boring. And they talked about watching the paint chip on the ceiling. And I tell everybody in my classes, learn your technical parts of your rope work at home. And when you're out there doing work with your partner, remember that you have a partner there, and make it interesting along the way. Every bit of it should be about foreplay. Dragging the rope sensuously across the body, pulling it through here, grabbing them there. Make it interesting along the way, and everybody can have fun through the whole thing. But the biggest advice for getting started is for people to do exactly what I didn't do, is be patient and go slowly.
Now, I hear in your presentations through the course of REAF, you've said about how you tie things unconventionally. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, when the suspension bondage craze first hit, it all came from Japan, the shibari stuff, and it was the most beautiful stuff a lot of us had ever seen. So we started emulating that, or being trained by those kinds of people, and it was really fun for the first year or two for me. And then after that, I wanted to break out of the box that they were in, they put you in. Traditional, very often to me, means limiting. And I wanted variety more than anything else, so I started changing the basics that we were taught and created my own genre and created my own toy box rather than being stuck inside anybody else's.
And what do you look for in partners? I've had some recent experiences with working with aerialists, and I've also heard a rope top who says he gives instruction to some of his bottoms about working your core muscles. Do you do similar things, or?
Right now, I feel that I finally have a purpose in life. My purpose in life is to infect the world with bondage, and I'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. And what works best for me so far is to make it available and easy for anybody. Anybody can do bondage. You don't have to have core strength. You don't have to be a svelte 90-pound small girl. Anybody can be suspended, and anybody can have fun with rope that wants to.
In one of your classes today, I heard that you say that a smaller woman could suspend a larger man. There's a lot of big girls like me in the lifestyle. What advice do you give on suspending bigger girls and bigger guys?
One of the things that's been great fun for me is breaking the myth that you have to be a small girl to go into suspension. Almost anybody can go up. I tell people, as long as you don't have any health problems, back problems, big problems like that, that if you can lay in a hammock, I can add enough rope to make it as comfortable as a hammock. So almost anybody can be involved in this and play in it.
And I also saw you do a lot of erotic demonstrations. Do you teach classes on that, or you have real-life applications? I know I'm being really nosy.
No, to a degree, I do, and I really need to expand my classes to include it more. One of my most popular classes I've been teaching from the beginning is bondage for sex. My kink is so strong, I've never had a choice. I always had to have bondage with my sex, and that was a little tricky in the teenage and early adulthood years. But I've got an awful lot of experience because of it, so I do like teaching that specific class. But I'm thinking about, because you mentioned it and a lot of other people have, expanding those classes for people, making it more available.
I was looking briefly over your website and your About page, so tell me where you are in your business ventures at this point.
I've kind of settled into Orlando, Florida right now because it's the second best place in the country for bondage industry. For me to make a living at all this, I've just barely, but I've doing nothing but tying up girls for a living for the last 10 years. And in order to do that, I have to be an entrepreneur. I have to take different pieces of any little genre that I can. I make a little bit of money on the artistic side. I make a little bit of money on teaching. I make a bigger chunk on the bondage industry, which is a whole different genre. That's where we create damsel in distress videos and stuff like that. And between all those different things, I make a living just enough. And some of my biggest things right now are the clips for sale stores. And I've got one called Lew Rubins Alpha Productions on clips for sale, and we started a water one recently where we're doing really wild underwater stuff with regulators and scuba gear bondage and stuff like that, and that's called H2O Bondage Gems. Those are my two biggest ones, and I still have my old archive site, the first site that I ever had, Bound and Determined, and that's still up. And my prints can be found at Lew Rubins Productions on zenfolio.com.
Now, you have some artwork in the show here at REAF. Do you want to talk about your inspiration for those pieces?
Each piece has a big story behind it. Each piece has good memories, and certain magics happened. Some were happy accidents. Every piece that's showing here are some of my favorite pieces, and they all have good stories behind them. Recently, one of my favorites is one I called Banished, where the girl is tied to an X-frame floating on the clear blue water. And that came from a childhood comic book where Tarzan was stretched out and to the four corners and set out free in the water. So since those days, I've been wanting to do something like that with a girl, and finally made that happen in the Bahamas about a year and a half ago. That's one of my favorites.
It's a very beautiful print. I had the opportunity to see it. Tell us about damsel in distress videos.
Yes, there's a big genre out there of people who never get to play. The BDSM community people buy my teaching stuff. There's a lot of people who never get to come out from behind their desks, never are brave enough to actually come into our communities, but they love bondage as well. And a big part of original bondage fantasies for a lot of us is the forced fantasies. That girl that and the more people I talk to about it, even within our own genres, the more people that's their beginnings. The hot secretary that you always worked with that comes in dressed all sexy, don't you wish you could just take her sometime? And so those kinds of fantasies are what the single biggest genre in the bondage industry.
What do you suggest for the vanilla contingent that listens to my podcast that wants to try a little bit of something in the bedroom, but nothing too crazy?
I say start from the beginning and buy my videos. I have teaching videos that take you from the very beginning level and teach you all about safety and basic ties. And the second one is Bondage for Sex for good bedroom stuff. And it teaches all the safety, and you can go at your own level, and you don't have to worry about interacting with people if they make you nervous. So a good place to start is by going slow and getting some teaching videos.
And where are your videos available?
Those are available on my Bound and Determined store. Bound and Determined is one word, bound, the letter N, determined.com. And in the store there is where I sell my videos.
I also saw that you're a bondage consultant. What does that entail? It's like a secret agent thing.
I get calls because I worked with kink.com for a while. I ran waterbondage.com with them, and they're the single largest producer of fetish porn in the world. And I gained a lot of experience there, and my last year with them was as a bondage consultant. So a lot of other producers, a lot of people wanting to get into the industry, a lot of people wanting to set up dungeons, all kinds of different things. Almost anything to do with bondage I can help with if you want it.
Now, what does it take to be a rigger? Like I said, I've had some work with aerialists, and I know that we have riggers who come and sort everything out for us, but I personally don't know what that entails in New York State. Do you need a license to do that, or?
You know, there's no official regulating process, and a lot of us in small rigging circles talk about that, because almost anyone can come up and say that they're good at it and not have much experience. So there is no regulating bondage council right now, but there's people talking about it so that we can keep people safer. Right now the biggest thing that we can do is share information and make sure that dungeons and dungeon monitors understand things well to keep people safe along the way.
So outside of yourself, what would you recommend looking for in a good rigger? And when I'm saying rigger, I'm meaning the person who sets up where you're going to suspend from, not individual people who are suspending other people. In my mind, that's a different issue.
Yes, in some cases that is a separate issue, sometimes it isn't. When I teach people to rig, I teach them how to use other people's equipment properly and safely. And when I talk to dungeons, I try to make sure their equipment is safe before they come in. One of the biggest things for bottoms in learning to trust someone who says they can rig them safely is to do referencing. Anybody that's done it for a while, someone will be able to reference them. If you can't get a good reference, don't do that.
That makes sense. Is there anything else you'd like to add for our listeners?
Boy, just that the Rochester Erotics Art Festival is a wonderful event. I had such a good time here. I get bored easily. I don't repeat events very often, but I might actually come back to this one if they ask me, because this is a terrific event.
I certainly do hope they ask you. And before we go, did you want to say a little bit about your very gorgeous assistant today, who you've done such amazing things with? I've never seen rope bondage that has taken my breath away like what you've done today, and I think she deserves to be spoken about.
I am so glad you said that, because in many ways I'm still a typical boy and forget to do those kinds of things. Drea Morgan is the single biggest inspiration for me in my recent years, closest thing to that I've had to amuse since my original partner, Maria Shadows. God bless her, she passed on a couple years ago. But Drea is just totally amazing. When I came into this, I didn't believe that there were actually women who were into this as much as I am. I was closed-minded and thought, how could anyone possibly be into it as much as me? Well, Drea is. And even though we have like a 30-year age disparity, we see things eye to eye kink-wise, and just became an amazing team. We're breaking new ground all the time. We're inspiring others, and Drea is making it all happen.
Age, I don't see age as mattering, and when the two of you work together, you flow so beautifully. You don't even see the age. And talk about the suspension that you just did.
That's a suspension that we're trying to find other names for, but the first time we did it, a very good photographer shot it for us, and we did it at Camp Crucible, which is a terrific event, and he called it Camp Fly at the time. And the name really doesn't do it justice, but it's what we call it for now. But basically what's going on is I broke all the rules of suspension in trying this new concept. Usually suspension has definite divisions of body weight for suspending certain body parts, and this just breaks all those rules. It's half hitches up and down all the limbs of the body, and the ropes don't just connect, they go up through the ring and to the other limb, so she's able to actually raise each leg up and down independently with lots of up ropes, and the lines are just gorgeous with it, and it's very comfortable, and they stay up for a long time. People love that one.
That was the most shocking for me, seeing her ability to move. And all the suspension that you did, her ability to move within it. Usually when I see suspension, they, pose for 90 seconds and then they come down.
That's right. That is so often, and that was the problems. What I started doing a long time ago was taking every problem that suspension had for being long-lasting and trying to find a way to solve it. And the final bottom line of making them more comfortable is any one position you're in will get tired after a while. We'll get sore after a while. Even laying in bed, I have to roll over once in a while. So I thought if I could find ways to make it so they can change their own position more than once, they could last longer. And in the two that I demoed here at we're at Rochester Erotic Arts Festival. I'm getting so tired I'm slur-mouthing now. The two that I showed here were the two most dynamic suspensions that I do. The first one, she can change her own position from right side up to upside down, all kinds of different ways, and the people can stay up in them almost indefinitely. I have to tell them I want to go home sometimes.
Are you inspired at all by aerialists?
Absolutely. And I've the silk people I wanted to talk to, everybody that does anything like that with passion, I want to collaborate with. And one of the girls, the silk girls that I talked to a few years ago, I said, it seems like you could accidentally get tangled in that and not be able to get yourself loose. And she says, yeah, it's happened at times in practice. And I said, that's really hot. So I'm going to make some evil creations with some aerialists sometime.
Thank you very much for your time. Are there any last contact information or any thoughts you want to leave us with?
You can find me anywhere on the web. Just Google my name, Lew Rubins, LEWRUBENS. Find me, say hi. I'm always happy to talk to people.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.